All right. We'll start.
Louder. Let's start.
All right, let's start. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to send Robert's warmest regards to everyone and his apologies that he cannot make it. My connection, I'm Mendy. Some of you know me. My connection to Robert is that I give a shir in his office for the last 3 or so years. And I was honored when he asked me if I can give this shir. I've been hearing about this shir for 27 years. Ever since I was a kid, all I can remember is Bob saying that on Tuesday nights he goes to hear Robert, and every time I say I speak on Shabbos in Shul, Bob interrupts me and says, that's not what Robert said. But I've been hearing about this shir, and when Robert called me, I have to be honest and say that there was a sense of, it felt very nice to be able, it felt like a big honor to give this shir, and as Bob said, there was some instruction from the Rebbe, so it's very, very beautiful to be here tonight. As we all know, we are holding, let me just make sure the recording is working. We're holding in the month of Elul. We are a week or so away from Rosh Hashanah, which is the high holidays. And what we know is that in the time of Elul, we're told, Melech Basada, the king is in the field. What does it mean the king is in the field? It means he's now accessible. When the king is in his palace, in order to get to the king, it's difficult. You got to try and write a letter. You got to get past all the bureaucracies. But Melech Basada, king is in the field. It means it's accessible to each and every one of us to try and work on ourselves and to go to the king and to say, we want to vote for you in Rosh Hashanah. We want to make you king. And that's essentially what Rosh Hashanah is about. I want to focus on a mimer which was said by the Rebbe in 1979. The Rebbe said this mimer. It was the Parsha of NITZAVIM-VAYELEch. The Parshas were together, which sometimes they are. And NITZAVIM always falls out the week before Rosh Hashanah. That's the way it works, the way the calendar works. Now this mimer is interesting because most Maimorim, at least the ones which people learn, are Maimorim, their discourse. Everybody knows what Maimorim means, right? It's a Hasidic discourse, which a Rebbe would say. Now, most Maimorim, and I'll tell you something interesting, during a Maimer, all the Rabbein, because when you say a Maimer, it's something very spiritual, something very, very lofty. It's beyond our limited brains. They used to every Rebbe, used to do something else. Some Rebbes used to hold on to the table, handkerchief. Some Rebbes would hold a cup. Anyway, there's different stories, and we see by the Rebbe, he would sometimes hold a handkerchief. Sometimes you'd see in some videos, the Rebbe would hold the tablecloth under the table in order to ground himself to actually be present in this world. Because when you say a Maimer, these ideas are so lofty that if you're somebody like a Rebbe, which none of us are, you don't want to close on nefesh. So this Maimer is a very interesting type of Maimer, because most Maimorim, were checked over by the Rebbe, at least the ones which we would learn, the ones which, the ones I have in my house, the books. They were checked over after the Rebbe said them. Somebody wrote them down, or a group of people wrote them down. We all heard of Yossi Jacobson, Simon Jacobson. So they were part of the team called the Chayzerim, the people who would write down the Maimorim and Sichos and Farbrengens of the Rebbe. Yossi Jacobson he started when he was 12 years old. He started doing it. And apparently what they say, my father told me he remembers as a kid, that when they, sometimes they would get stuck, 5 hours after the Farbrengen finishes, they get stuck at a certain point, and little 13-year-old Yossi Jacobson would raise his hand and say, oh, by the way, the Rebbe said that. So we're talking about a real genius. This mimer, it's in all the books that the Rebbe checked over, so it's called Melukot. It's in these books, however, it's written not in a way which, so when they checked over the mimer, they would add words here and there to make it make more sense, to make it easier to learn. This mimer, nothing was added. It's a raw mimer straight from the Rebbe's mouth. So it's an interesting flow. Now, as I said, this week's Parsha, Nitzavim always falls out before Rosh Hashanah. Now, where are we holding? Let's just put this into context for a moment. Nitzavim, Moshe Rabbeinu standing before the people, days before his death. Remember, Moshe, the leader, he's everything. They wouldn't be in this if not for him. He took their parents out of Egypt. He did all these miracles for them. He's standing there days before his death. Now let's imagine this for a moment. There are millions and millions of people. Put yourself there for a moment. It's a big mountain. It's almost like out of a movie, right? Or or like, what's it called? The Lion King, where you have the lion on top of the mountain, right? And all the animals are looking, right? That's what it's like. Everybody here knows Lion King. It's older than 35 years.
No, it's not.
I think it
It's
is.
a movie, isn't it?
No.
All right, forgive me. So, Moshe Rabbeinu standing there on the top of this mountain. By now, there are millions and millions of Jewish people, men, women, children. Think about it, everybody's been in the desert for years. So everybody has massive bags. Everybody has these tents with all their belongings and all their families. And when you think about it, you think of just a bunch of people just standing under a mountain watching Moshe at the top. And don't forget, Yeshua, who took over after Moshe, he stood right next to him. Because Moshe wanted to show the people, they didn't want any machlokes after. So what did they do? No broiguses after. He wanted everyone to know Yeshua is the next leader. So he stood next to him during this whole long speech of the book of DEVARIM. So just imagine this, millions and millions of people. It's not just a small group under the mountain. It probably went for 10 kilometers or 5 kilometers. Who knows how long it went for? Don't forget, they were all camped out. So everybody wanted their space. So let's just say 5 kilometers, right? 5 kilometers. Moshe Rabbeinu standing there, and he gives over this unbelievable speech. Now, some commentaries tell us that DEVARIM is split up into 3 categories. The first category of DEVARIM, chapters 1 till 11 of DEVARIM. What does it talk about? It talks about different commandments, right? Moshe is reminding the people in certain commandments. That's why DEVARIM has a lot of repetition, because DEVARIM it's a long speech essentially. So the first 1 till 11 is different commandments reminding the Jewish people what mitzvahs are important and why you should do them. Sometimes there's more explanation in DEVARIM versus the mitzvah which would have been said previously in the Torah. The second part of DEVARIM is the part of DEVARIM which is called the bris, the covenant. Moshe Rabbeinu, before the Jewish people go into the land, and then we become actually a people for the first time, not just a desert roaming tribe. Wow, we only became a people properly once we went into the land. That's only when our solidity as a nation really gelled together. So the second part of the DEVARIM is all about this bris, all about this ultimate covenant, or I like to use a different way. I like to use the word alliance. Right? We translate bris to covenant. It's more of an alliance. It's much deeper than just a covenant. A covenant is abstract. An alliance, it's real. And the third part of DEVARIM, excuse me, but I can't remember. The relevant part, I can't remember exactly what the third part, the way this was described, but that's the second part, which is what we're going to focus on. Now, how does it start off? This second part of DEVARIM, Atem NITZAVIM hayom kulchem. Now, forgive me, I'm going to get the exact translation, because my English versus this English is a lot better.
It says stood firmly.
Let's see. Atem NITZAVIM hayom kulchem. You are all standing this day, Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, before the Lord, your God. Rosheichem, your tribes, Shiftechem, Ziknechem, V'shitrechem, Kol Ish Yisrael, your elders and your officers, every man of Israel. So everyone's standing together. Next verse. Tapchem Nesheichem, your young children, and the woman, V'gercha asher b'kerev machanecha, and the converts who were within your camp, Mechoite Veitzecha, from the woodcutters, Ad Shoyev Meimecha, and till the water carriers. Now, interesting. I guess water carriers was a good job, because it's trying to show the contrast, the Torah, between the wood choppers and the water carriers. I'm not sure which one was the good one, which one was the bad one. But the Torah's point is that everybody's standing here before Moshe. This is the ultimate. This is the climax of Moshe's long drasha. It's the climax. Now, what do we say? We say that Moshe's before the people, and Moshe is preparing them for the moment of truth. He's preparing them to go into the land. Now, I want to tell you something interesting, which maybe some of you know. On the Shabbos Mevarchim of Elul, of Tishrei, which falls out in Elul, which is this week, we don't take the Torah and bench the month. We don't take the Torah and say the special bracha and get ready and bless the new moon. Why don't we do that? Because it says in the month of Tishrei, Hashem blesses, the Baal Shem Tov explains, and then the Maggid of Mezrich explains even more, that in the month of Tishrei, the Jewish people don't need to bless the month. Why? Because Hashem blesses the month of Tishrei itself. Now, he wants to do it probably, Hashem wants to do it for biased reasons, right? He wants you to crown him king. He wants to make sure the Jewish people are at their full strength, right? So Hashem blesses the month. And through this bracha, which Hashem gives to the month, we then have the ability and capability and energy to go on for the next 11 months and bless every single month. Only because of this big blessing which Hashem gives for the month of Tishrei. And that's why we don't bless the month of Tishrei like we do by
So
every
is it
other month.
So when Rosh Chodesh actually falls?
It's no questions
Questions after.
at the end.
It's not my policy. You could ask. It's okay.
So so normally when Rosh Chodesh falls, we do the special prayers. So for this Rosh Chodesh we don't.
No.
It's
No.
just ordinary davening.
I mean, yeah. Big Fabrengen, an extra Fabrengen.
Дай маленький пирожок.
So,
Маленький пирожок.
the Baal Shem Tov says, and this is actually from the Hayom Yom. I believe the Hayom Yom is next week. I believe it's Chof Hei or Chof. I believe it's Chof Hei. I think 25th of Elul. It's the Hayom Yom of that day. I may not be exactly correct on the exact date, but it's within 1 week. So, what happens is the Baal Shem Tov says that this bracha which Hashem gives is Hashem giving us the ability and the energy and the capability to bless the rest of the months. Okay. Now, when we look inside the Torah, we say that during this period, when Hashem is blessing the month, and let's put that aside for a moment, let's now focus on when Moshe Rabbeinu is standing in front of all the people, like we imagined a couple minutes ago, standing right there, 5 kilometers, right? Moshe Rabbeinu standing there. The Torah tells us that this blessing, the fact that, well, not the Torah, the Baal Shem Tov, tells us, I didn't have the L'chaim, that's why I'm... The fact that the Baal Shem Tov is saying that this blessing has the ability to give the other 11 months power, to almost give us the power to bless the months, means that this must be something very deep. And the way Hasidus likes to call it is, it's an inyan klali. It's a general idea. It's not something which is unique for one day, or unique for one moment, or unique for one... This is something more general. This is something more serious. Not general to take it away, but on the contrary, it's more relevant. So, we say that when we are about to go into Israel, what are we doing? We're about to create this serious alliance, this covenant with Hashem. That way, when we go into Israel, we're secure. Not secure, we're not talking about physically, we're talking about secure in who we are, right? So, what does it say? It says that, I'm going to get you the exact words because they're absolutely brilliant. It says as follows. It says, when we were there, all 10 types of people were standing there, right? Like we said, the water carriers, the wood choppers, all 10, let's just categorize it like 10. All 10 different types of people were standing there. And, sorry. Does anybody remember when the last time we did a covenant with God was? It was in a place called Chorev, right? Yeah. That was the covenant prior to this. So, we're all standing there. We're all about to do this bris. And we're talking about, the Torah tells us, sorry, I was going to tell you the exact wording. The Torah says like this. This is unbelievable. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay, the exact wording is unbelievable. It says, "Sheloi itchem levadchem anoichi kores es abris azois, ki im es asher einenu po imon hayom." Not just that we're going to make this covenant with you, whoever's standing, let's say, I don't know, at that point they were probably, let's do the math. Anyone a mathematician here? Well, there were 3 million men, women, and children. That's the approximate number which the Mefarshim give us, which left Egypt, right? 600,000 males, 3 million, approximately between 2 and 3 million is the number which the Mefarshim estimate. Now, let's remember, all the people in the desert died out, so it's a whole new generation. Moshe Rabbeinu was the last of them. How many people are we talking now? Several million. No, much more. It would be much more because everyone had children. Their children probably had children. Now we're talking about several million.
Yeah, 2.5 plus.
So we say, not just is the covenant being done with the people who are there, the ones who aren't there. Now, what does that mean? This means something very deep. What does this mean? Who are we referring to? Us. Since this covenant is a covenant which is not being made just with the people there, but this is an everlasting covenant. This is a covenant with every single Jewish person making this covenant with Hashem. It must mean that this covenant, meaning this covenant was relevant to them back then. It was very relevant, right? It was part of their life. But us, living how many years later? Probably a couple thousand.
3,666.
How many?
3,666.
Very good. 3,666 years later. How is it relevant to us? How is it relevant to us? So obviously we have to say, and the Rebbe explains in the Maimer, that this means that this covers this covenant relevant to us. How is this alliance relevant to us? Obviously this must mean something spiritual. It can't mean something physical, because the people who were there physically would have the covenant much stronger than we would have it today if it was something physical, right? And it would have been already almost watered down to an extent by the time it reaches to us. Yeah, obviously we're referring to something which is relevant to all of us sitting around this table, and all of us in Bellevue Hill right now, and every single Yid in Sydney, every single Yid in Australia, every single Yid in the world. This is something which isn't just abstract. This isn't a covenant and an alliance which is abstract, something which means nothing. Rather, this is something very, very important and deep and fundamental in our service to God. Or maybe that's how it would express itself. Okay. Now, I think it's very powerful, just that alone. It's very powerful, the fact that it's connected to us today, something which happened 6 years ago. And it's supposed to be as strong today, as strong as it was back then. The whole point of an alliance is that, time won't really change the alliance. Right? An alliance is something almost everlasting.
But it's one long chain.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So what are we saying now? Let's go further. Now, there's a saying, which some of you may know this saying. It says, Shabbos misborchin kula yomin. It's an Aramaic saying, which says, Shabbos blesses all the days. Now, not just does it mean Shabbos is going to bless all the days from the past week, it also means that Shabbos blesses and gives all the beautiful brachas which come with Shabbos, also the week to come. Now, what does that mean? That means last week's Parsha is also relevant today. Why is it also relevant today? Because the fact that last week blessed also the week to come. Right? It's almost you get a double, you cross it over, right? You're always getting blessed twice. The Shabbos of both weeks is always relevant. Now, who remembers last week's Parsha? Parshas Kisavai. Now, how does Kisavai start? It says, Kisavai el haaretz. When you arrive in the land, when you enter the land, Asher Hashem elekecha noisen loch, which Hashem will give you. Now, there are many, we could talk another 20 shiurim just about that line. But I want to share with you what the Baal Shem Tov says. The Baal Shem Tov says as follows. Now, how do we know the Baal Shem Tov said it? Because the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, quoted it in the name of the Baal Shem Tov and said it in public. And what I'm about to give over, he said in Yiddish, in 10 lines in Yiddish, which is I wouldn't say it's very rare, but to have 10 lines in Yiddish in a Maimer is extremely rare. Usually you have a couple words, it's extremely rare. It says as follows. It says, what does it mean, V'haya kisav el haaretz, when you will arrive in the land? When one arrives in one's personal life to a situation where they finally realize it's time to connect, it's time to go deeper, it's time now to take these things seriously, in brackets, this alliance seriously, which God is giving you for an inheritance, that Hashem elekecha noisen lach, God is giving it to you. When do we use the word noten? Who speaks Hebrew? Noten means to give. Yeah. Now, if it would have said God handed it to us, it would have used a different word. The fact that we use the word noten shows on, when you noten, what happens when you give somebody something? It's almost like a gift. They didn't earn it, you're giving it to them. It's a gift. So when one finds himself in a situation, when you arrive and come to a situation, when you arrive in a situation, and God, that you finally want to take things, take it up a notch, and this that Hashem gave this to you, this alliance, this Yiddishkeit, everything about being Jewish, Hashem gave it to you as a gift, right? Not 10. He gave it to you as a gift, as an inheritance. V'yishavta bo. And you shall settle there, right? When you go to the land, Hashem gives you, and when you settle there, what does it mean when you settle there? When you finally are comfortable in being who you really want to be. When you're finally in a situation that you can sit back and breathe, but you're not worried about how do I look, why am I doing this, what if somebody looks at me incorrectly. The word in Chassidus is bisyashvus. Doing it properly, you're doing it like a mensch, you're comfortable, you're doing it in a way of tranquility, calmness. Right? So I'll tell you a beautiful story. We all heard of Jonathan Sachs, right? Bob, there's Robert, I'm sure, quotes Jonathan once in a while, right?
A few times.
A few times?
Yeah.
So one of the most amazing stories of the Rebbe, I personally think, is this story. So I believe it was in the maybe late 60s or early 70s. Jonathan Sachs comes to the Rebbe. He was working then in, my mind, which university was it? Cambridge. He was in Cambridge University, and he was involved in doing events and certain minuscule things for Jewish kids there. I don't know how religious he was at that point. Peter's definitely heard this story before. We've said it in the morning, Chassidus. I think maybe yesterday even, or 2 days ago. And he comes to the Rebbe, and he says he arrives by the Rebbe. It was 2, 3 a.m. and he waited there. He was already ready to go back to Manhattan, to go to his hotel and go to sleep, and right, so get, as I say, Yoitze Zayin, Yoitze, right? When you're about to make Kiddush and they say, oh, my Yoitze. Did I fulfill it? Right? That's like, did he fulfill it? The best translation of Yoitze is Yoitze. Yoitze. He was ready. He was like, I'm Yoitze already. Okay, I came here, Rebbe calls him in 3, 4 a.m., whatever it was, between 2 and 4, something like that. And comes to the Rebbe with his, perfect English accent, with the correct words, and he was able to really articulate himself in a really good manner. And the Rebbe stops him in the middle, and the Rebbe says, what are you doing for Jewish student life? This is word for word. What are you doing for Jewish student life in Cambridge? And Jonathan Sachs looks back at the Rebbe, startled almost. Remember, I'm sure he had respect for the Rebbe at that point, but it wasn't like later on in his life where he considered the Rebbe his mentor and his teacher. He looks back at the Rebbe and he says, well, Rebbe, I'm sorry, but in the situation which I find myself in, and the Rebbe interrupts him. The Rebbe doesn't like interrupting people, right? The Rebbe didn't even look in the videos by dollars. The Rebbe didn't, even the people who would say the craziest things, the Rebbe never interrupted. Sometimes the secretary came in, had to, push people away, but the Rebbe interrupts him. Now this is Jonathan Sachs says this over in video. I heard this from his mouth, this story. I heard this from him. And the Rebbe looks back at him, the Rebbe says, no Yid finds himself in a situation. Hashem places every single person in a specific place for a reason. Nobody finds himself anywhere by chance. And Jonathan, of blessed memory, looks up and he recalls when he says the story, he says at that moment, he realized, number one, who the Rebbe is. The Rebbe is somebody who doesn't just preach and preach. He creates leaders. That's a successful leader, somebody who creates other leaders. Lamplighters. And he said at that moment he made a decision and said he's devoting his life to Jewish outreach, and till his passing a couple of years ago, that was what he dedicated his life to. When he tells it over, he always dedicates it to the Rebbe every time. He says, if not for the Rebbe, I wouldn't be in this business. He says, it wouldn't be me. He says, because of that meeting with the Rebbe, right? So back to the Maimer. When one arrives to a place, right? Sometimes you go to a place, what am I doing here? You finally arrive to a place and you remember, I wasn't put in this place for no reason. I didn't just, in the situation I find myself in. Hashem sent you there, and you finally come to this realization. You finally come to the land, you arrive in the land. You realize, you have that chap. You say, that's it, I got it. You finally get there. And what happens when you get there? Number one, remember when you get there. Remember, this is a gift. Not everybody is as lucky as you to get yourself in that situation. That's number one. And number two, make sure you're beis yashvus. Make sure you're calm, you're tranquil, you're stable. Because sometimes if one does something too extreme, too quick, then it's never real. It's all about emotion. There's not enough intellect. Chassidus always demands from us to have seichel and midas mixed. You have to have that perfect combination of intellect and emotion. Now, why do we put on tefillin? Right? So we have tefillin shel yad, which is the hand tefillin. That deals with our heart. Our heart symbolizes emotions, right? It feels, if you feel something, it's all got to do with your heart, emotions. And we put tefillin around our head, which is what? Our brain, intellect, seichel. So what do we put on tefillin? We put on tefillin to have this perfect combination between seichel and midas, between intellect and emotion. If one just acts out of emotion, you do it too quick without the seichel. Now, let's remember, sometimes it's important. Some things you have to do with kabbalat ol, right? With just accepting it and doing it. But something so substantial, like let's say deciding one day I'm going to start taking Yiddishkeit seriously. If you just the next morning, just do everything, it's not going to last long. It's not going to last long. It has to be with yashvus. It has to be stable. Everything has to be thought out. Everything has to be a combination. That's why we put tefillin every morning to make sure that our in Hebrew the word is I believe it's mi'upas, which means the soldiers use that word because their guns, their scopes, and the guns always have to be aligned, right? It's a crazy story. If you have time, I'll tell you an unbelievable story by a friend of mine from the army. But that's how I learned the word, because he told me that the whole story was that his friends. I'll tell it to you very quickly because it's an unbelievable story. My friend, the Chabad boy from Los Angeles, his name is Yossi Ginsberg. He went to yeshiva. After yeshiva, he went and learned. He did smicha, became a rabbi, and for whatever reason, whatever got into his head, he decided, I'm going to the army. Not just am I going to the army, but I'm going to go to the combat, and I want to become a commander, and I want to get into the top special forces. And to make the story short, that's what he did. He got into a top unit called DEVARIM, a top unit, combat, paratroopers. And at one point, this is about 5 years ago, he gets to, his unit was deployed to Hebron. Now in Hebron, everybody's been to Kiryat Arba, right near Hebron, and you could walk that pathway between Kiryat Arba and Hebron. There's just like a pathway, right? It's like in the middle of a mountain almost, and you're just soldiers on each side, almost like standing around you, because you have the Arab town literally from here to the picture of the Rebbe over there. That's how close it is. And then on the right, and then over here you have Jewish homes. In fact, Itamar Ben Gvir lives right there on that pathway as well. So my friend was now on that pathway to the left. There's a couple Arab homes, and then the last home on that same street is one Jewish home. One home. So there's always two soldiers guarding that home. My friend Yossi, we call him Yoske, not Yoshke. Whenever somebody was upset at him, they called him Yoshke, but I called him Yoske. Yoske, it's a Yiddish name, Yoske. Yeah, you've heard of Yoske. Yoske. Now, Yoske. So Yoske was, Yoske was put on duty to guard that house. And there were two people, always one in the front, one in the back. Now his friend, who was put on duty, it was him, he was the commander of the whole unit in the area, and he was doing that for a couple of hours, whatever it was. His friend, who was first day out of training, 18 years old, was put in the back of the house. And Yoska's job was to mentor him and to, make sure he knows what's going on. It wasn't deemed a high-risk situation for whatever reason. And Yoska, patrolling, whatever, let's cut the story short, he hears screaming. So he runs, he's trying to hear where it's coming from. He runs to the back of the house, and he sees his friend, whose first day out of training, this was his first assignment out of training, is lying there on the floor, and there's a terrorist right on top of him with a knife, a butcher knife. I saw a picture of the knife, and Yoska showed me the picture, trying to kill him. And the kid, he's lying back on the floor, and he's just kicking his feet up towards him. Now, his gun is way back down there. So straight away, Yoska goes to his gun, he looks in the scope, and he says, my gun isn't milpas. It's not aligned. But he says, I've got to do what I got to do. He gets the right angle, and he kills the terrorist 7 shots. I saw the picture with my own eyes of Yoska standing there. I saw the picture. He has pictures of it. Now, the story is that his friend, the part of the Israeli army, the policy is when somebody comes close, even with a knife, unless they start charging at you, but they're walking at you, you have to first fire 2 warning shots, and you have to warn them twice. I believe, if I remember correctly, it's the first 2 words are waka waka, right? Waka waka, I believe it means stop in Arabic. So his friend screamed out, waka waka, blah blah blah, and the guy's not listening. He's coming closer, and he says it again, waka waka. Nah. The guy's not listening. He's coming, and now he's very very close to him. So he takes out a safety pin. He knocks in the magazine. And instead of knocking in the magazine, right? Most of us probably held a gun before. He you got to tell. He flicked it out. The magazine went out. And by that time, the terrorist was already on top of him. And Yoska came, and Yoska credits it to $1 of the Rebbe he had in his pockets. And it's a crazy story, because to shoot a gun, especially an M4 rifle, without alignment from the scope, it's almost impossible to get an exact shot like that. And I saw pictures of the shots. It's literally like this. It's on the guy's chest like this. And when Yoska says, I carry a Rebbe dollar with me, because the Rebbe with Chevron, he got a whole crazy story. And he says, there's no doubt in my mind that's what saved me. So how do we get into this idea of milpas, of aligned? I don't know. We got into this idea of being aligned because when we said one arrives in a land, and you finally arrive in a place in one's life, you realize it's time to get serious. It's time that all this nonsense is behind me. It's time to get serious. You do it in a way of isyashvos, settled, you're calm. You don't do it too radically. Slowly but steady wins the race. And that's the point of Vayek Yisav El Haaretz. Now, so let's go a little bit further here. Okay. Now, sometimes, just to add on what I said a moment ago, sometimes it's the physical things in the world which end up giving us inspiration to then go on and to make this change, to arrive in the land. Sometimes it's something physical. So one can come and ask and say, how can something physical which is bad, how can that then give you a true and everlasting inspiration, let's call it, right? Let's call that, right? To then go on and to now change your life because of that. Or to make an improvement in your life, or to start working on oneself. So the Rebbe explains something very, very deep and something very beautiful. The Rebbe says, because what's inspiring you from this physical object, or this physical matter, or it could be, a speech by maybe someone who's not Jewish, but an inspirational speech, or a book written by, I don't know, Jordan Peterson. It could be anything. But you can come and say, how is it possible? This isn't MS, this isn't real. How is this getting me to now suddenly think about my life and Hashem, and right? Rebbe explains something unbelievable. Rebbe says, and this is also, before, on Friday night, we say you did Nefesh. And before you did Nefesh, something called Hoidu. It's 4 pages. I doubt many people say it. I don't say it every week. It's very long, but it's one of the most beautiful, it's all Kabbalah. It says that when one cleaves for something, strives for something, it means, benafsham behem tisatov, it means that then a shama is really trying to cling onto. It's called the nitzot eliki. The nitzot eliki, like we had in Tanya a couple of weeks ago, Peter, remember? Every single item, every single object, every single thing in this world is only in this world because God constantly creates it to be in this world. Now, how does that manifest itself? It's called a nitzot eliki, a godly spark in each item, each object. So it says, and we say it in Pasach Eliyahu, we say it in Hoidu before Shabbos, that when one cleaves for something, and let's say one cleaves for this chip. I really want that chip for no reason. So you think you want it because it tastes good, or because you like salt and vinegar, salt or kettle chips. Kabbalah tells us, you really want it. Why do you really want it? Because there's a nitzot eliki, there's a godly spark in that thing. And obviously this is deeper than subconscious. This is something got to do with your neshama, so you're not going to feel it. But it's called cause and effect. It's eventually going to manifest itself in you wanting that shit. Why? Because your neshama wants to grasp that nitzat in that object. Your neshama wants to grasp it's almost like a magnet. Your neshama sees it and it's like, I need that right now. Why then are you not? We all just magnets to everything? That's a good question. The answer is because every neshama is made in a certain way. And it only cleaves to things which are connected to its neshama, which would align properly. Think about like two pieces of a puzzle. Oh, it's one puzzle, just connect any piece. No, pieces have to fit properly. Now, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that when one wants a certain food or drink, he doesn't want it because you're hungry, because you're thirsty. You want it because your neshama is right now cleaving for that piece of food or drink. So, back to our Maimer, the Rebbe says that when one gets this inspiration, and it's not necessarily from something good. The Rebbe says the reason why you got that inspiration, and the reason why it could bring to a proper and fundamental change. Now, it could, not always will it, obviously. Most of the times it won't, right? Most of the times it will just stay in emotion and wash away after a couple of days, right? We've all been there. So what ends up happening, the Rebbe says, is that your neshama is clinging for that nitzat, that godly spark, in that form of inspiration which you got. So you heard a good speech, let's say. The godly spark in that thing is what your neshama is now connected to. And that's why one can draw a good positive outcome and a godly outcome from something which isn't necessarily, so to speak, godly. Okay. Now, let's get back to our Maimer and go further and explain what's going on here. Okay. So, the Alter Rebbe explains something very interesting. The Alter Rebbe explains you have this idea of Eretz Yisrael, Israel, right? We're going into the land. That's the main focus here. We're going into the land. Now, the Alter Rebbe says you have this idea, this level of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, in the world, right? You have, right? Look on the map. That's Eretz Yisrael. It's in the world, right? He says so too. You have this idea in Shana, in the year. Now, what does this mean? I'll give you an example. Every single thing in the world is part of a spiritual blueprint. So think about it like an architect. Now, anyone here is an architect? No? We all know what a blueprint is. A blueprint has every single thing drawn up to the T, every beam. Blueprint.
Copy.
Right? Every single thing is drawn up to the T. Every single beam, every single plumbing, the whole plumbing system is part of this blueprint. So obviously, if something is in this world physically, Hashem has a spiritual blueprint, and if it is in the world, right? Think about it like you're looking at a building. If you see it in the building, you know it's going to be in the blueprint. So if you see something in the world or a concept, you know this is in Hashem's blueprint of the world, right? So just simple math, right? It makes sense. Logic. So just like we have this idea of Eretz Yisrael in the world, we also have this idea of Eretz Yisrael in the year. Okay? In the year, what's Eretz Yisrael in the year? Eretz Yisrael in the year, the Alter Rebbe says, is like Rosh Hashanah. Okay? We could ramble about this idea, Israel, Rosh Hashanah, the similarities, and interesting. But we're going to focus on what the Alter Rebbe says. And the Alter Rebbe says, just like in order to get to Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people are standing all there by the mountain. What did they need to do? They had to sign this alliance with Hashem. They had to sign this covenant, this bris, Christus bris, with Hashem. So too, before Rosh Hashanah in the year, if one wants to get to Rosh Hashanah properly, we have to sign an alliance with Hashem. Now, just like we said about the spiritual blueprint, just like we have this spiritual blueprint. Give me 1 second, sorry.
There is no blueprint anymore.
Oh, okay. We say that in this idea of Eretz Yisrael, this idea of having this covenant also exists in Torah, right? We're trying to now make the blueprint more detailed, right? It also exists in Torah. How does it exist in Torah? Now, we like to call this, we know that there is Torah shebichsav, which is the written Torah, which is like, Torah, Nevi'im, Tanakh. Then you have something called Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law. Now, obviously, this shir is not discussing why you need the oral law in order for Torah Shebechsav to work, or for the written law to work. Right? That's an obvious. We're not going to get into it. But the idea is that Torah Shebechsav, Torah Shebal Peh, Torah Shebechsav is the written law. Torah Shebal Peh is the oral law. Now, the point is as follows: in order for one Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, we say is like Eretz Yisrael. We say it's like Eretz Yisrael. Why is it like Eretz Yisrael? Eretz, what does Eretz sound similar to in Hebrew? Eretz, Ratzon. Eretz comes from the word, the way the Rebbe says in the Maimon is Sherotzosol Lasos, that one wants to do. Ratzon Kaina, the will of his master. So Eretz is like a Ratzon. Eretz is like Ratzon. Ratzon means your will, right? So the point is as follows. The point is that in order to properly fulfill the correct will of Hashem, and in order to fulfill the ultimate will of Hashem, what one must do is learn Torah Shebichsav. Learn Torah Shebal Peh, to learn the oral law. Now, it's a problem because if you think about it, Torah Shebichsav essentially is much higher. It was written by Hashem himself and then given over to Moshe, and eventually, we have it here today. But let me ask you a question. When you learn Torah Shebichsav itself, when you open up and you say, Atem NITZAVIM-VAYELECH, you're all standing here today and you talk about the cows and you talk about the Mishkan, you talk about the measurements, do you feel like you're expressing Hashem's will? Because I personally don't. Right? It's sometimes I do. Right? When we say, we read the Ten Commandments, Anochi, right? Anochi Hashem lekecha. There's certain times when you feel very connected, so to speak, to the Torah Shebichsav itself. But sometimes it's very hard. What's the reason why it's hard? Because Torah Shebichsav is God's knowledge. It's God's brain.
So it's infinite versus finite.
Yeah. It's very hard for us to fathom exactly and to actually connect with it constantly. However, when one practices halacha, right? When one says, I'm going to make a bracha now, or I'm going to bench, that's really expressing what Hashem wants. Now, you may not understand it. In fact, you won't understand it. When was the last time anyone opened up a Shulchan Aruch or heard of a halacha in shul or whatever, read a halacha, right? A law from the code of the code of Jewish law.
I've got an extra one here.
Yeah, there you go. When was the last time anybody understood a reason behind anything? Can't understand the reason behind most things. Right? Tie your right shoe before your left. Why? Because we like to favor the right, because the right is chesed. But that's not a reason, that's a spiritual reason. But why should I tie my right before my left? In fact, most mitzvahs, even the ones we have reasons to, the reasons are almost secondary. And the mitzvahs itself, the halacha itself is very difficult to understand. Now, why is it very difficult to understand? Because halacha is a direct expression of Hashem's will. However, Hashem's will is something which is infinite. Hashem's will is something which is impossible for any of us to understand. Hashem is the one who created our brains. And obviously he created them in a way that we don't understand Hashem's will. Hashem's will is higher than nature, time, space. But how does he manifest it? How does he manifest himself? He manifests himself through halacha. And that's exactly why we don't understand halacha. Because it's the manifestation of Hashem's will. It's too hard to break down properly. However, we do know that when one does, just like when the Jewish people went into Eretz Yisrael, they finally became a people, so too one follows halacha. You're finally now doing the things which Hashem really wants you to do. Now, I just want to point out, as something I like to say a lot, in Yiddishkeit, we like to think, or some people like to teach us that it's all or nothing, right? Either you keep Shabbos or you don't keep Shabbos. Either you keep kosher or you don't keep kosher. Either you're a from Jew or you're not a from Jew. It's not like that. It's not like that. Everyone has their own neshama. We're all holding at a different place. And we all obviously should try and become better people and always strive to go up. Like, right? Your life is like a bicycle going up a hill. You stop going, moving your feet in the pedals, you end up falling backwards. So we like to think that that's Yiddishkeit. It's either all or nothing, but it's not. As long as you're on a journey towards, for example, Shabbos. You can have someone who never kept Shabbos in his life. And for him to start thinking about keeping Shabbos all day is the most difficult, every week is the most difficult and abstract thing, and he's not even going to think about it because it's so difficult. So you start off and you say, start with Friday night. Keep one Friday night. Oh, Friday night without my phone, without my TV, without my wife calling me. Excellent. Right? Shabbos day, and you go next, right, a week later. You can don't go back to watching TV on Friday, but Shabbos day, come to shul, stay by a farbrengen, stay by a Shabbos meal, and when you get, oh great, I got to come to shul and leave the house for 5 hours, excellent, right? It's all about the journey. Now, the reason why this system works with Yiddishkeit is because the difference between Yiddishkeit and, let's say, for example, something bad, let's say a detrimental addiction. What's the difference? The difference is an addiction, the more one does, right? It's an addiction, so you'll do more, but you'll feel worse and worse and worse and worse and eventually self-destruct. But with Torah, the more one does, you end up wanting to do more. You end up wanting to experience more. You want to feel more. It's like addicting in the good way. It's addictive in the right way. So when people say, oh, no, I don't keep Shabbos, come to a Shabbos meal. Start off by just making Kiddush. I have a very close friend of mine. He never kept Shabbos once in his life. That's when I went with him to New York. Took him to the Rebbe, and he, for the first time, kept Shabbos. He said it was the best thing. He didn't talk to any of his family members for a full 24 hours. After Shabbos, he opened his phone. There was 50 messages over there from his wife, and big tzoros. But the point is that after that first time he kept Shabbos, now every Shabbos, here's the thing: he doesn't work. Doesn't work on Shabbos. He still carries his phone, but he's on the journey now to keeping Shabbos. The point is that Yiddishkeit is not all or nothing. We like to think it is. It's structured like that in halacha. And the reason why it's structured like that is because if it wouldn't be structured like that, it'd just be a mess. So there has to be the rule book has to be very clear. But it's not all or nothing. So the point is that when one decides to keep halacha, right? This whole thing is a build-up. You keep halacha. Halacha is like Eretz Yisrael, right? Just like the Jewish people needed to go into Eretz Yisrael to finally almost be a people, to finally do what Hashem wants, right? That was the ultimate dream. That was the goal. So too, when we practice halacha, even something very small and seemingly insignificant, like tying one's right shoe tie your left shoe before your right. First you put your right, then you put your left, right? Something simple like making a bracha. Something simple like, being nice to someone is also halacha, by the way. Just a basic halacha, right? Now that something interesting I'll say is that, you have different halachas, which are almost things which are moral. And Peter and Bob have definitely heard this. I've said this many times. I like to say it's something which I really like. There are many halachas which are morals, right? Things which, don't do this, and some basic stuff which would be morally, don't steal, don't kill. And you would say, okay, great, why is the Torah telling these to me? Any decent human being would practice these things. And the answer is because our morals change. And just because today you feel a certain way, tomorrow you might not feel a certain way. That's why if you do it because Hashem said to do it, I don't not steal because it's not moral. But my moral compass is the Torah's moral compass, not the world's moral compass, because as we see today in 2024, the world's moral compass has gone mad. And that's exactly the point, that when you do something, even though you would think you're doing it because it's morally correct, don't do it because it's morally correct. Do it because the Torah told you to do it. Because the world's morals will change. Today, tomorrow, it always changes. Okay, now let's get back to it and let's finish up. So just like we needed the Eretz Yisrael to finally do what Hashem wants, so too, we need this idea. We need this idea of following halacha to finally actually do Hashem's will, and to actually properly do Hashem's will. Do it, what He wants. And yes, we don't understand it. Why don't we understand it? Something very lofty. It's Hashem's seichel, it's Hashem's chokhmah. You can't understand Hashem's chokhmah. How it manifests in the world is us doing A, B, C, D. We can't understand it most of the time. Okay. Now what's the point? You see, the oral law is the ultimate bris. The oral law is the ultimate alliance. Because we don't really understand a lot of it, right? It's all supposed to be rational, but we make it rational. The oral law, talking, different, everything we do is basically is all of the oral law. Excuse me, a mezuzah on your door. You know what the Torah says about a mezuzah? Tie them on your arm and write them on your doorpost. That's all the information you got. Right? But then we have this. So when we put a mezuzah up like this, based on the rabbis in the Gemara, the Tanoim, the Amoraim, the Rabbanim throughout the year, throughout history, who, really defined the oral law properly. Now it's interesting, the Torah, people say the Torah is outdated. Torah is the most up to date, the most,
relevant.
I would use the word progressive, but not the progressive which we like to hear in the news.
No.
The Torah is essentially the most progressive thing in the world, because the way the Torah was created, the system, is that the rabbis should always be on top of things and use the Torah guides and the halacha to make things, for example, how do we know about not using a car on Shabbos? The car didn't exist, right? I did a shir a year and a half ago. It was a very large shir actually, and maybe you were there, maybe with the lawyers. We did one for the lawyers. We did one for a lot of lawyers. We did a special class comparing Jewish law and civil law, and we had a former judge, and we both presented. I presented, the halachic side of things, Jewish law, and he presented civil law. And it was almost like a debate, right? And at one point he's like, well, I want to use my Apple Watch on Shabbos. It didn't even exist on Shabbos. Started laughing. I said, well, that's the beauty. In fact, you just said my point. That's the beauty of halacha, that we take the halachas and the laws from the Torah, and we use those things, and we take these laws and we make them relevant, right? Everybody gets what I'm saying? I don't know if it's coming out correctly. The point is as follows. Let's finish up. The point is like this. It's explained in Chassidus that the oral law is like a beam. What is a beam? What's the beam's job? To connect the roof and the ground. Now, what's the oral law doing? The oral law is connecting Hashem's chokhmah, Hashem's divine wisdom, which is impossible for us to grasp any other way. This beam is connecting Hashem's divine wisdom, right? Chokhmasa yisparech, the chokhmah of Hashem. And what's this beam doing? It's bringing it down. It's bringing it down so low that it actually manifests itself in us doing actions, right? Now, if one wants to connect something very high and something very low, what do you need? Something greater than both of them. On the one hand, it has to be relevant to both of them because it needs to connect, right? It has to have a connection, right? There's something very lofty and something very low. So on the one hand, you have to have that dialogue. It has to be able to have a dialogue, some relevance. Both parties have to have a relevance. But on the other hand, it also has to have this very, very lofty idea in order to bring them together, right? Like we see in America, right? You had the Abraham Accords. How did this come together? You had to have somebody who's very, very smart, right? Jared Kushner, right? You can watch on YouTube the interview and he explains how he does it. And he has a book. Unbelievable, right? And Lahavdil, this is a similar point, right? He had a dialogue with those countries and he had a dialogue in Israel, but he was higher. He was like, he was America. He was higher. And therefore, because he had that power, he was able to put those two people together. So the point is that what's this alliance which we started off talking about? What's this bris? What's this covenant which we need to have before Rosh Hashanah? What's this covenant we need to have for Rosh Hashanah? We can only go into Rosh Hashanah once we have this covenant. Just like the Jewish people only were able to go into Israel before this covenant. What's this covenant which is relevant to each and every one of us around the room? Which the fact of the Torah says that Asher, from the water carriers to the wood choppers, to all the people who weren't there, all of us. This covenant is practicing mitzvahs. Because when we practice a mitzvah, this covenant, is the oral law. The Oral Law has the ability. The one, like we said, it's like a beam. It connects above and below. It has a relevance to both sides, and it's able to bring them together. Now, in Hasidic terms, some of you will be familiar with this. It's called, you have two types of energy, very, very general. Mamali Kol Almin and Sovi Kol Almin. Mamali Kol Almin is the type of energy which Hashem uses, which is very specific. It's specified. It's a certain type of energy. This cup, let's just make it let's bring it down. Let's say this cup needs, think of it like an energy bar. It needs 3 bars in order to function, to exist. Mamala Kol Almin, this energy from Hashem will give it its 3 bars. Mamala Kol Almin is the energy which creates everything in the world. Because this type of energy gives everything its unique and individualized amount of energy to survive, to sustain itself. Then you have another energy called Sovi Kol Almin. Sovi Kol Almin, Mamala Kol Almin means fills up the worlds. Sovi Kol Almin means it surrounds the worlds. Meaning this energy is too much to confine in a cup. Or on a larger scale, it's too much to confine in the world. So it's much, much higher. You would think on the one, right? You would think what's higher? Well, the one which fills it up because it can go in, right? But it's not. The one which is the energy which is higher is the one which can't even go into the world. It's too high. However, Mamala Kol Almin actually has something very, very great to it. The fact that this energy, which comes from Hashem, is able at the end of the day to still manifest itself in the world means in one way it actually is the ultimate, right? So in Hasidus terms, this is called, right, this alliance, this bris, this covenant which we all need, this covenant which is relevant to us. It's called the combination of Mamale Kol Almin and Sovi Kol Almin. It's called the combination of both worlds. And this alliance, this bris, is something which isn't just relevant to those people back then. It's a very practical covenant. And I'll read from the Maimer itself. Let me just get it here to show how the Rebbe ends the Maimer off because it's brilliant. The Rebbe says, this covenant manifests itself when one acts in the way one should act. Now again, it's not all or nothing like we said. You're on a journey. And when one acts in a way that one should act, we end up coming to good hachlotas. Everyone knows what achlota means? Achlota means a good resolution. You end up coming to a good resolution. And what happens with your good resolution? You end up doing more Torah and more mitzvahs. Or you start that journey of Torah and mitzvahs. And what happens? We know the oral law, what does it do? It connects us at the bottom to Hashem at the top. And who's the middleman? What's the beam? The Torah. It connects us. And the Rebbe says, with this will come a ksiva v'achsima toiva. And the Rebbe also says that let's not forget about the month of Elul, the Rebbe says. The month of Elul is very, very important. Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. Right? I'm with my beloved is back to me. Right? I first yearn out for Hashem, or I first go to the field where Hashem, right? The king is in the field. He's there, he's accessible, but Ani l'dodi, I first have to walk to the field in order to make it happen. So we have to first start by doing a mitzvah, do something. Start the journey, come to a shir, do something to get our neshama moving a little bit. And when this happens, the Rebbe says, we'll get onto this journey of following Torah and mitzvahs, and ultimately by improving one's life and one's service to Hashem, and that consists of learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. And remember, when we do these mitzvahs which seem insignificant, like we explained today, it's not insignificant at all. It's a clear expression of Hashem's will. And the reason why you don't understand it is because, well, we don't understand most of them, is because this is directly from Hashem's will, and it's manifesting itself in a very simple way. And the Rebbe finished off the last line, which is that the tachlis, right? What's the ultimate? The ultimate is for the coming of Mashiach. Now, when's Mashiach going to come? Like we know the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, right? When's Mashiach going to come? When the Baal Shem Tov's well springs are spread out everywhere. When Chassidus is spread out to the whole world. Today you can go online. You can be sitting in a resort in Jamaica. I'm only saying because I have a friend, I saw a picture tonight, he was in Jamaica in a resort. And you can open up your iPad and you could sit there and learn a Maimer Chassidus. And that's the proof that we're in the era of Mashiach. So thank you all for having me. Hope we all, including myself, I'm not preaching. Hope we all take this and have a meaningful Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Shkoyach.
Пацаны, ему курить не нужно, что ли?
Нет.
Oh no. Didn't record the whole thing.
It's alright, we've got a copy here.
You'll have it.
Don't worry. Mandy. Don't worry.
It's all good?
Yeah.